But Device Solutions is an engineering firm that does IoT embedded development devices. So if anybody in the room is developing a device and wants to, even if you're at the beginning stage or in the middle of it, wants to talk to us about how we could help you or give advice, or Chris and the team, they're really great people. And sometimes I know as a startup, you're like, I don't have a ton of money, but we're always willing to lend a hand and help you guys out. So. Trying to think. They've been around for 20 years, so they're experts in what they do. Anything that monitors, measures, tracks, or communicates data. So, yeah.
Good afternoon. What a gracious welcome. I'm delighted to be here. I don't do enough of these kinds of events, unfortunately, with travel and commitments to investors. I'm Tony Atti, CEO and co-founder at Phononic. Look, I can't wait to tell you about our company, our technology, semiconductor innovation, but as I thought about the event on the drive down, what I'd rather do is I cherry-picked a handful of slides introducing you to the company, but more importantly, sharing with you lessons that I've learned and experiences that I've made along the way in building Phononic from, quite literally, no exaggeration, the physics building in the basement at the University of Oklahoma to where we are today with now 150 employees, operations all over the world, and fairly significant revenue growth. Before I dive in, so my background is, what I love about what Jim's doing here is I grew up in an underutilized part of the world in Buffalo, New York, not the hotbed of venture capital. I learned entrepreneurship through mowing lawns and delivering newspapers, which many kids today don't even know what that is. But it was a hard work ethic that I see throughout the state of North Carolina, obviously here in Wilmington, and that's really 95% of the secret of entrepreneurship is hard work, grit, and perseverance, and I've experienced that firsthand. I started my career in materials science in R&D. I was an incredibly average scientist. I then got a unique opportunity to start in venture capital when the technology that I worked on in grad school was to be commercialized through 3 major research universities. It was an unbelievable disaster, but it was an incredible learning experience. Intellectual property, stock options management, the role of founders in a university setting. I then went into a venture capital fund investing in crazy ideas like Phononic. Our focus was universities that were off the beaten path, that were underserved from a venture capital perspective. Market risk, tech risk, team risk, nothing but for a mother to love. Those were the areas where you found the most compelling opportunities. I then, after that experience, was recruited, unbeknownst to me, by what would become my founding investors, Valley blue chip VCs, who hit me with a powerful theme. First lesson for today in terms of building your company and raising capital, what's the macro theme that drives investor behavior? What was pitched to me as Silicon Valley is not randomly named. Silicon is the godfather of the semiconductor community, has changed the way we communicate, how we harness the sun, how we light our buildings, how automobiles now see. But Tony, in the world of cooling and refrigeration, there's been no fundamental change. Go figure out why. Because if we can figure it out, that's the next transformative, multi-billion-dollar market opportunity for semiconductor innovation, on top of the $260 billion of legacy that semiconductor technology has done to date. That's the first piece. That's my North Star. Any mistake or struggle I've had along the way, I communicate that message to my investors so they know what we're trying to achieve, and then from there, what are proof points along the way. Beyond that theme is an incredible sustainability wrapper. The world's getting hot, brutally. I don't care what your politics are. I don't care what you think the sources of it are. The data is sort of irrefutable. And oh, by the way, when you peel back the onion, the world's doing a pretty okay job addressing CO2 emissions from conventional sources like combustion or automobiles. But the next frontier is cooling. World gets hotter, we demand more cooling solutions. Those use mechanical legacy technologies that contribute to the problem and exacerbate the situation. So now you have a powerful theme with an incredibly powerful driver of investor behavior. Didn't always have it this eloquently, but you could see the sort of pieces early on. Taking it one step further to the platform. In a moment, I'm going to tell you a semiconductor story, but what Phononic innovated beyond the chip platform is an ecosystem that completely eliminates the use of toxic refrigerants to add to the global warming CO2 problem. So right here in the first couple slides, we didn't always know it this clearly, but when my co-founder Matt Trevithick, who was my co-founding investor, when he and I started the company, we believed, if not could sort of articulate, the message on these first 3 slides. And then Matt's challenge to me, and I'll never forget this, is show your glimmer of greatness. To address the problem and the opportunity that I just showed, incremental improvement isn't enough. The reason I founded Phononic was because of this slide. I was able to diligence the legacy where semiconductor innovation has had a transformative impact. And through material science, process engineering, semiconductor packaging, and the team and universities that we worked with, I believed if we could crack that source code, we would be that next transformative platform. Okay, the glimmer of greatness. How do I connect the theme with proof points? This slide captures it in a super painful way. When we started, through process engineering, semiconductor processing, semiconductor packaging, I was flying around the world with a catalog of thumbnail-sized chips that when you power them, they get really cold, they're really efficient, and they pump a truckload of heat. All the technical metrics that the team and I developed because the market told us that's what the chip needed to do to displace the legacy mechanical compressor technologies that had been used. We've won. We're done. I'm flying all around the world a decade ago, meeting with all these progressive refrigeration and HVAC companies, dropping my data on the table that was so hard fought from the team. All right, Tone, where's the condenser? We don't use it. Where's the coils? We don't have it. Where's the evaporator? Well, we don't use it either. What Freon do you use? Oh, we got rid of it. And even the most progressive, forward-thinking companies look at you and say, I don't know how to adopt this. What do I do with this? That took us on our first unexpected journey that we were completely undercapitalized to do. We totally underestimated how much work we would have to do in the productization, the invention of the productization to bring the chip to life. The mechanical, the thermal, the software, the electronic controls, all of which are packaged around the device and bring it to life. I get sensitive sometimes and bristle when people tell me how long I've been doing Phononic, and finally I turn and look at them and say, hey, it took solar 30 years and billions of dollars of government investment to get the inverter, the panel, the tracker, the software, the installation before it became a $30 billion market. LEDs took 40. The nutty gang I got in RTP did it in 8. We underestimated how expensive it would be, didn't realize we would have to invest in that areas, but we're able to develop an entire intellectual property portfolio that now accesses more than $60 billion in global markets and the potential to mitigate roughly 1 billion tons or 1 trillion tons of CO2 per year. Going back to my investors, sticking with that theme, the next transformative evolution, and showing glimmers of greatness, technologically speaking, we were able to raise significant capital relatively accretively because people could see the size of the prize. Okay, then the hard work started. I'm very passionate about this. There's a gazillion business books that have been written about product market fit. You know what people don't talk about? Market product fit. As a platform innovation, we're very proud of the fact that you can add up the applicative markets for Phononic to $60 billion or more. Who would have thought that a commercial HVAC system that goes in a building has roughly the same kind of thermal requirements as spot cooling for a CPU cooler? That's exciting. Well, the biggest problem with having a $1 billion market is having 8 of them. And this is where we were humbled. Is the next step is first, for all of you, why do you want to be in this market? Is it attractive? What are the price points? What are the barriers to entry? What are the demands and problems that that market's struggling with right now? Identify that first, and then Your product, service, technology, or solution, does it satisfy that problem? And does it do so in a dramatic way where you can hedge out and mitigate and eliminate any competition? As some in the audience, I think I have some of our Tidewater investors here have seen, this slide has changed in the last 5 to 7 years as I presented it with different logos. I can tell you candidly that roughly 24 to 36 months ago, Phononic's roadmap was governed by one of the worst emotions possible: pride. You're not reliable. Let's do data centers, baby. You can't get cold. Let's do refrigeration. Can you get really cold? Let's do ice cream freezers. Can you scale? Let's do HVAC. Our product roadmap was 50 miles wide and a 1/4 inch deep. And we were the OEM making the final solution for every single one of those market sockets. My friends, that is a bad place to be. We had to step back with the help of our investors, with the help of our board, and tighten it up. So we had those glimmers of greatness, though, that gave the investors the confidence to stick with us, double down, and put more money in. And now, based on that, over the last 18 months, we've dramatically changed our business model from hardware-only, one-time product sales, heavy CapEx manufacturing driven, to solutions, services, and licensing, where in almost every instance, we have a recurring revenue commitment that goes with the market segment we're in. So 18 months ago, I stepped back with the help of the market and my board and said, okay, market product fit. What are the markets that we want to be in? Data and auto. Every time your phone buffers, every time you're on a Zoom call, every time the sensor in an automobile needs to see directionally around you, that is an optical transceiver that has to be kept at a very specific temperature. We have a killer solution for it. I want to be in that market. But I want to be in it in a way where my value is being recognized. Earlier this summer, we announced the first ever strategic supplier agreement of a thermoelectric cooling solution in the automotive market. With Luminar as our LiDAR partner, we are now qualified in with Mercedes and Volvo. Not for autonomous driving 15 years from now, but for the basic sensors that allow my kids not to hit stuff, even though they still manage to do it, when they pull out of the garage, right? Second piece, Tim and I were just talking about device solutions with data. Cold chain. The most difficult thing to predict is consumer behavior, particularly for cold, frozen, and perishable items. So major grocers had heard of us, came to us, and we developed a cold chain solution, actively cooled or frozen, that's completely changing the way warehouses are built. Instead of the retailer or merchandiser refrigerating or freezing large areas of space, of which the use is obsolete depending upon your purchasing behavior, now they only cool or refrigerate exactly what they need. And then with an IoT tracking system, they know exactly where the tote is, they know exactly where your ice cream order is, and they can identify if there's temperature swings before you ever notice it or before they ever have to write off the inventory because it was out of temperature spec. And the last piece that's had me flying all over the world is we just announced the world's first ever commercially viable application of HVAC using a non-mechanical system at an 8,500 square meter commercial building in downtown Paris. 150 kilowatts of installed cooling and heating capacity. And when I introduced this concept to my team a year ago, they almost quit on me. Tony, we want to make air handling units. Are you fucking crazy? We are not an HVAC air handling company. We are going to license the product rights to the thermal component that goes into the air handling unit and brings the air handling unit to life. You would have thought I canceled Christmas. But then when they toured the building this June, and a brutally hot day in Paris, and it was miserable and sweaty, and then when we went on the 4th floor, and the 4th floor had been powered, and that cooling component terminal unit was on, it was an emotional moment where we finally saw we had sort of cracked the source code. So these are now the 3 markets we're in, with products that are adding differentiated value with a business model that makes sense. Sometimes entrepreneurs are given bad advice where it's trust your gut, do what your gut tells you. If I would have done that, I would have run us into the ground 18 months ago. The market speaks, and if you listen carefully, it'll tell you the truth. In the earlier version of this, when we were hardware only, an investor said to me 18 months ago, I love this company, I love the sustainability, I'm going to value you like an appliance company. Why don't you call my mom ugly while you're at it? And then when we demonstrated the transition to services, solutions, and licensing, it was like, aha, now we're going to value you like a tech company, because that's ultimately the Qualcomm for cooling model that we want you to see. So what have I covered? Have that strong mission statement. Have that theme. Communicate it. Recite it over and over. Second, through customer, market, product fit, identify those glimmers of greatness that when things go bad, you're not re-educating your investors as to what you intend to achieve. They know it, they got it, they'll back you, and they'll go through it. And then as you move beyond, you'll find tremendous attention finds you. There's a strong theme and narrative with some strong PR and marketing support that we've told to the world, and we've gotten some incredible response. You're all invited. December 7th is the unveiling of the commercial building in downtown Paris. CNBC is going to be there. The French press is going to be there. It's going to be an unbelievable event. So we believe in some respects.
Space on the jet for all of us.
Yeah, exactly. So I want to finish on a more, I think that was the last thing I had. Oh, and then where are we set up in terms of globally? Carolina has now become our center for material science, design engineering of the platform that we license and the solutions that we bring to the table. My sales and marketing and product team is based in the Bay Area. We have very strong supply chain partnerships on the chip and product level in Thailand. This shit ain't easy. I spend thousands of hours on planes and hotels flying all around the world. It's very rare that I'm home for more than 2 weeks at a time. So let me use this chart as a segue into my final sort of recommendations or lessons learned from all of you, for all of you. I try and help out a bunch of young entrepreneurs in RTP when I can. And there's a couple things that I'm struck with when they come in. You're gonna work just as hard for $1 billion exit as you are for a $100 million exit as you are for a $10 million exit. Set that theme, set the glimmer of greatness, set the aspirations for that $1 billion outcome, and the market will pull you along the way. Should you choose to exit along that, that's up to you, but at least you're doing it opportunistically. The reason entrepreneurs sometimes fail to grasp that is not because they're not thinking big, it's because they're consumed with two things that drive me freaking crazy: valuation and ownership. So, pro tip, afterwards I can't wait to get a beer, but if you're gonna come up to me and say, Tone, can you help me raise money or look at my business model, but I don't want to give up control of my company, I will politely walk away from you. Phononic has raised now $220 million in venture capital and private equity. I do not own more than 50% of the company, but there's not a damn thing that could be done without my approval. And when I say this to young entrepreneurs, they look at me bewildered. Guys like Tim do not want to run your company for you. They want you to do it. But if you have that reserved mindset or that cautious and concerned mindset where if I raise capital, it's going to dilute me or limit my ability to grow my company, respectfully, you tend to get small outcomes. So I try to capture these things in a blitz of time. I look forward to the chair session, the moderated session, and I'll be here all through the evening. So grasp that theme as it applies to you. Find those glimmers of greatness. Make sure for all your hard work, you got the right market, product fit, and then the business model will reveal itself. And just don't think small when it comes to capital, when it comes to equity, when it comes to valuation, and cut yourself off at the knees before you even get started.
So I'm Richard West. I'm CEO and founder of Baebies, and I'll talk a little bit about the prior two companies that I had as well, and speak about my now rather long entrepreneurial journey, and I have some lessons learned at the end. So circa 1987, I started my first company. It was called Triverix.
Hold the mic closer to your
Yep, it was called Triverix. It was a medical equipment development and manufacturing organization in the life sciences space. That was in the Triangle area, and that was VC seed funded, and then we raised about $40 million for that. We created a big company, but I would say we misunderstood something at the very beginning of that, and that is what will people pay for a mature company in this space? And a little bit too late, we found out it was about 1 times revenue. And so you raise $40 million and you create a company with revenues of $40 million that was worth about $40 million. That arithmetic doesn't work. And so lesson number 1, understand in the market that you're going to go into, how will value be perceived? And how are you going to go create value in that market? It turned out here we need a lot more scale than we were able to develop on the money that we had. And so there was an exit. It wasn't one I made any money on. Some of the investors got some of their money back. But it was a great learning experience for the next one. And the next one was a Duke Technology spin out in 2004. And this technology it's not unlike what Tony was talking about for their silicon. We use a printed circuit board, and it's basically a liquid handling technology. And before this, every other diagnostic device or anything that did liquid handling used pumps and valves and pipes where the physics were pressure. And so we moved droplets around using electrical fields just by turning switches on and off and applying a voltage using a set of physics called electrowetting. And so what? We had a technology that we could make work. Now what do you do with it? And so we went into the diagnostics business in this company. And diagnostics are take a sample like blood, combine it with a reagent, and present it for detection. We just did all the liquid handling with our technology instead of pumps and valves and pipes. And as you'll see, there are some keen advantages, which it took us a while to figure out. But this company, we were very equity efficient. We raised about $15 million, all angel and angel groups, plus some strategic partners. We also got about $30 million from NIH grants, and about 15 million non-equity from those partners as well. And then we were able to sell that company to the world's largest DNA sequencing company, Illumina, for $96 million. And then we were also able to license that same technology back from the buyer into the current company, Baebies.
30 million from NIH, that's a really high number for those kind of SBIR grants and stuff.
Yes, it is. It is. We built a grant team to go chase that and develop some keys to success and how to do that well. So we had a very high win rate of close to 50% on $2 million grants, and it adds up. And so we exercised that same financing model for Baebies early on, and to date now, we've raised $78 million in equity, $50 million from NIH this time, and another 25 from partnerships. The equity was from angels and angel groups that we made money for in the prior company. I tell my peers raising money is very easy. Just make money for an investor and they'll give some of it back to you. So that's a good way to start anyway. And then we moved up the food chain a little bit to family offices, and we have some strategic investors as well. We're commercializing products in newborn screening. We have 4 FDA approvals in newborn screening, and now a point of care device where we have 1 FDA approval on what we think is going to be a revolutionary new platform. This Finder instrument that you see a picture of here, that's a multifunctional instrument. That means we can do tests like PCR for infectious disease detection. We can do clinical chemistry. Our approved test is for an enzyme deficiency. We can do protein detection, which is like an antigen test that you can use for infectious disease detection or detection of heart attack and a bunch of other things. And it's the world's first multifunctional instrument that it's at the point of care, like urgent care or emergency department, and whatever test you need to do, it will be able to do that type of test.
Do you intentionally avoid institutional venture capital funds?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. My first company was institutional venture capital,
Okay.
Growtech, Morgan Stanley Partners, and some others, and been there, got the T-shirt.
Yeah.
Didn't want to repeat that experience. And to Tony's point about sharing ownership, so this company, my co-founder, myself, all members of the team via stock options, we own 25%-ish of Baebies, but we control the board of directors, we control our own destiny, we decide what happens next. And that's a very comfortable position to be in, because one thing you know for sure is your business model isn't going to work. You're going to have to pivot. The thing you thought was going to work, you have to go do something else. And typically, institutional investors aren't as kind to people as they have been to Tony. And not that it wasn't rough, I'm sure it was, but
I didn't say kind.
patient, yes. And this is our consumable. So it's a razor blade model. You have an instrument and a consumable, and we build those in Durham, North Carolina, although the parts come from China, Korea, et cetera. And so what's a multifunctional platform? Again, we can do tests across sample types and test type. Basically means any type of test that you want to do, we could put on this same instrument. We have 3 products. On Seeker, we've shipped 17 million tests. That's where we have 4 FDA approval. On Finder, we've shipped about 100,000 tests, including a lot of COVID tests during COVID. And then Keeper is our at-home testing platform, where we've just gotten our first big contract from BARDA, who's another funding agency, to develop, to basically push the tests that we're going to put on the Finder program into an at-home device that's the size of an Apple TV, think, but still will be able to do tests across the test spectrum, so chronic disease management, infectious disease detection, all of that. This is our new facility in RTP. We've expanded our product development resources. We're building a high-capacity manufacturing line to support the launch of our first multifunctional platform, which is in clinical trials right now. We have 120 employees, including about a dozen in Hyderabad, India, that we've recently hired to supplement our research and development workforce and to get samples. Getting the right samples for the test you're developing is a lot easier over there than it is here, and that's been really helpful for us. And so our big goals right now are prove this multifunctional thesis, build some commercial traction, and prove the product economics. It turns out, another lesson learned, if you're going to sell something, know what the price is and know what the cost is. And make sure that the price is higher than the cost. Sounds easy. Should be easy. But this is something we've spent a lot of time figuring out exactly how to do, and I think we're there now. So our motto here is any test, anywhere, for everyone. And so a couple pieces of advice here. This is all part of the book that I'm writing called The 1,000 Mistakes I Have Made. And it's a matter of how to pare it down to that many as opposed to think what they are. In my first company, we chased growth. We were profitable at one point and then pumped more money in. The market went sour. The investors got disillusioned. We could have grown that company as a profitable company without additional capital. We had that opportunity. We didn't take it. Should have. Plans that were too optimistic, you have to be optimistic. You have to be outrageously optimistic. But if you're making a cash forecast, be pessimistic, because there's only one mode of failure for any company. That's running out of cash. Until you run out of cash, you can keep going and figure out something else to do. Sharing too much power too early. You know, your investors are your partners. Choose wisely. Hiring talented, well-educated people with no specific requirements in mind. I've fired Harvard MBAs and Caltech PhDs that didn't work out because we didn't really have the right role for them. And then outsourcing sales inside the US, at least in our space, you have to know the customer. You have to really understand the customer. You can only do that through a sales transaction. And so these are just a few of the mistakes I've made and things that have worked. I call it the stool theory of finance. This is a one-legged stool is not stable. So at least the last couple of companies, we've not been equity only. We've been commercial partnerships, grants, product revenue, and equity. So we have 4 legs on our stool, and that's worked very well for us. When equity was unavailable in 2009 after the 2008 crisis, NIH raised their budget by 50%, and we got $10 million in grants that year. So they were counter-cyclical, and that's really helpful as well. Obsess about what your customer wants before developing a product, and give them what they want. We do partner for sales outside the US with that new multifunctional product. Our biggest customer is going to be a distributor in Saudi Arabia. Implementing advanced systems and processes early. This could be enterprise resources planning. This could be data analytics, whatever it is you need. Invest in good tools so you understand your business really well. In building a team, in the history of management, no manager has ever said, I fired that person too early. So if you know you made a mistake, rip the Band-Aid off and unmake the mistake. And then management team cohesiveness, I think this is the basis for almost everything else. That consistency, communication, that clarity of goals that comes from working together with your management team and all being on the same page. And I recommend this book by Lencioni for exactly that message. And so that's what I had to say, and thanks very much for your time.
Awesome product, and this is going to solve 10 million problems, and it's, you know, kind of almost limitless in its use case. And hey, no one's interested. What's happening? What's the marketing element? Obviously, you've been very successful since you've been on CNBC. You're going to be on CNBC again, the French version here in the near future. How did you do that? How did you build the business? How did you get the message out?
Excuse me.
Do we have a second mic?
Well, let's differentiate between marketing and PR, two separate things, or within a broader segment. A mistake I made early on is I underappreciated the importance of product marketing and product management. So our problem was actually the opposite of what you mentioned. It was everybody was after us. Like everyone understood that dilemma with cooling, the refrigerant restrictions that were coming in. Heat is just a problem in general for a variety of applications for markets that we all experience every single day. So the inbound volume was overwhelming. And the mistake I made is because I'm arrogant and I think I know what I'm doing, is I allowed our product roadmap to be driven by the combination of sales people or sales experiences directly to engineering. That is a bad thing. Sales are motivated by transactions, as Rich mentioned. They'll tell a customer whatever they want to hear to get that transaction done, and then communicating it directly to engineering drives a very expensive roadmap. So the first step was fixing that and bringing in an experienced product executive, product managers. Sales did not like it. The sort of order of authority changed at Phononic when we did that. So that helped get us on the right track of answering Rich's point, is understanding what the market needed, what the customer requirements were, and then building something that met that. In terms of getting awareness for that, that's actually not as complicated as people tend to think it is. We go to CNBC a lot. They've been very good to us. They're just incredibly gracious, but so has Forbes and Fortune and a bunch of other publications. And look, this is sort of public relations 101. They're looking for a good story. They're looking for something that resonates. They're looking for a theme. Doesn't matter. I think half the PR we've gotten, people don't realize where we are, right? Like they think we're a Valley company, or they're like, oh, you're in North Carolina? So it really isn't a regional bias. It really is, as entrepreneurs, how you tell your story. Is there that mission? Is there that theme? Is there that narrative that makes sense? And then the last piece is very logistical, if not a bit boring, getting a good PR firm. A lot of the major media outlets work with the PR firms. And me banging on CNBC all day long didn't do anything. We had a great PR firm in Boston that was like, hey Tony, we know the tech writer at, actually your World Life Sciences, we know the tech writer at Fortune, we know the tech writer at Forbes, we know the tech writer at CNBC, we're going to put a bid out, you got a great announcement coming, we're getting 24 hours to capture the lead, and then we're going to come, I'm like, cut it loose, like, we got it. And when you position it that way, you'd be surprised at, and then their loyalty. I just spoke at a Forbes summit in New York last month, and it was they keep coming back for more. So that part's not as complicated. So really getting that market product fit with product executives, and then once that's set, you'd be amazed that the PR sort of takes care of itself.
Yeah, that's correct.
Excuse me, I'm going to important thing right here.
You guys a beverage, there you go. There you go. Yeah.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Tim.
Cheers, Tim.
Bad guy.
Cheers.
We got
Cheers, everyone.
get the answers loose here. Rich, you kind of mentioned a very different approach, but similar in nature in terms of building a grant writing team. In terms of marketing, the PR element of it, a little bit different in life sciences, and you kind of, in two ways, marketing, maybe one versus the FDA. In this case, you mentioned BARDA, you mentioned NIH, similar question, but would love to hear, like, how do you get the message out? How do you approach the world? Where are you kind of finding, and I think, obviously, some of it is the science leading you to a product, but maybe the market leading you to a product as well. So kind of would love to hear you talk about that.
Yeah, so again, very similar story to Tony's. With this multifunctional platform, when you can do any test, all right, but there's thousands of tests out there. Which one do you do first, or second, or third, or fourth? And so each one of those needs to have that market fit, where we know we can develop something that can be well differentiated. But the next level is, well, how hard is that going to be to develop, and how much money is that going to take? Will we be able to get it through the regulatory process? What will the price be relative to the cost? All of those things matter as well. And so we put a bunch of things into consideration, and then evaluate where's the place to go. We're in clinical trials right now on a product that will do COVID, flu A, flu B, and RSV using PCR in 15 minutes. That's going to be highly differentiated relative to what else is out there. And our competitors for similar products are getting paid $65 or $75, and our little consumable will cost $5 or $6. So we can make good money, but it hasn't been easy to develop. but the regulatory risk is not that high because FDA has seen a lot of these kind of things. That's sort of how we got the product market fit. On PR, life science, especially FDA approved products, you have to be careful what you claim.
Yeah.
FDA has to approve what you claim, although we're chasing the holy grail in diagnostics as well, this multifunctional platform, and so it's big, what we're trying to do, but you can only take an incremental approach. You have to go application by application, or in our case, test by test, in order to make that case that what you have can be that holy grail in the fullness of time.
Yeah, that's super. I should have called you up a couple months ago. I guess I lived the multi-hour, wee hours of the morning RSV experience, a big wake with a 10-month-old. Just a call to you.
Spencer, can you move the mic a little closer?
Oh, sorry. I've got a huge echo up here, so it sounds to me like, it's overpowered.
On the second try in the back of the room gets a little louder, so.
Yeah, just throw tomatoes at us if we're going in the wrong direction here. But no, I think, both of you mentioned during your speeches a lot, kind of the investor nature of growing a business, right? Right partners, right timing, thinking about control in terms of not just an equity stake, but decision-making and really, I think, control of the board was mentioned. How do you think about growing and scaling a company in that sense? Who you're bringing in, when you're bringing in, how you're identifying partners. Tony, you mentioned obviously sales being very transactional in nature. Investors probably also very transactional in nature at times. Can you speak to kind of both of those as you think about growing your business?
I wish I could say I was organized. I think if you look, if you look at the chronology of Phononic, different investors in their transactions require different diligence. So there's a famous story when Matt and I got started. He was a partner at Venrock. I pitched Venrock the morning that Lehman Brothers went under for $1 million pre-seed science experiment. True story. And because we were 3 hours behind, on the TV screens in the back, there was literally Lehman bankers filing out of Park Avenue. And I'm like, $1 million to investigate compound semiconductor materials for cooling, right? And I finished, it was the most fun presentation I've ever given, right? Because what do you have to lose, right? And afterwards, Matt comes in and goes, that's great, here's a term sheet, you're the founding CEO of Phononic. True story. But Matt's like, we'd like to have a co-investor. So Matt and I spent an entire afternoon, I'll never forget this, making a list of all the Valley investors that would do a materials science startup. The meeting was over in 15 minutes and we went to the bar. There was 4 names that we came up with. It was a true story. Like, well, shoot, like, he won't do it, he won't do it, he won't do it, he won't do it. So at that point, it was $1 and a dream, the glimmer of greatness, Jim, that I mentioned. But then it becomes much more professional and organized. And I always say this to entrepreneurs when they're raising capital. Like, whenever I ask someone, how much are you raising, you can tell right away if you're giving a random answer. Well, why? $5 million. Why? Well, it's a Series A. Like, no. So, I try and tell entrepreneurs, or how we've done this well at Phononic, is we'll say, look, this is where we want to be. This is our aspiration. And then working backward from there, these are the deliverables. They could be technological, they could be product, they could be commercial, they could be revenue driven, but these are the deliverables I need to get there. And then these are the capital amounts required for each one. And when you lay those capital formation breadcrumbs out, it makes you easy to diligence. You might not get it all, you might get more than you expected depending upon the market conditions. And then each investor has a different level of rigor as you go through that. So on the venture side, it was all about how big can this thing get? Blow us away, Tony. And on the institutional private equity side, it was more, well, okay, that's great, but how much capital is it going to take to get there? What if you're wrong? To all the points that Rich eloquently made. So sort of stumbling on my words, where do you want to be? Work backward from there. What are the capital allocations needed to get there? And then the investor world reveals itself in that regard.
Yeah, ditto to everything Tony said. I'll add that 1, 2, 3, our mission by 2025, that's aligned with our investors. We show that every week at our all-employee meeting. We talk about, well, if we don't get the clinical trial going this fall, we miss flu season and we lose a year. We don't have a year to lose, right? And so you need consistency between what you're telling your investors and what you're telling your team, or you're going to have trouble. And I think that's another important element of this.
Actually, Rich brings up a really important point. I was mentioning this to him, and I think you, before we get started, and I think all of you need to hear this. This is the most unusual capital raising environment I've ever seen in my career. I think Jim made a joke, he saw me speak once before. It's like, I raise money from everybody. You know, my parents, venture capital investors, my dad passed, my mom was all in. True story, he had problems with the management team, he actually told me that. So anyway, but we had a board meeting at the end of July where some of the slides that I put up here, we've had a great summer. We've had a couple of really compelling product and partner announcements. I told everybody, to Rich's point about consistency, the deals we're going to start closing are licensing, revenue, recurring model deals that capture our value, and we did. And I still got a fastball down the middle at the end of July from one of my largest investors, which was, hey, that's great. We want to see a cash preservation plan that gets you to 2025. Now, in the earlier days of Phononic, a venture investor would have said, hell with it, we'll just go raise more money. Not the world I'm in now. Now it's like, hey, dude, we want to see a conservative plan that sacrifices growth, that curtails your wings a little bit, and we want to see capital last you through 25. And I got indignant, like, what the hell's your problem? And they were like, hey, newsflash, we're living in a high interest rate environment. We're going into a presidential election season, it's going to be a disaster. There's global unrest and multiple wars that we're now financing. And there's a whole bunch of entrepreneurs, me included, that have never lived in a high cost of capital world. So that's maybe the better answer to your question. I wouldn't have gotten that with the investors I had 5 years ago. It's like, hey, let's just go do another round, we'll raise more money. Now it's like, hey, you're a player in real markets with real customers and real revenue. You can't just, hey, let's go do another round. Those days are over.
Well, I think you hit on kind of the exact next point in terms of the everything else you get from investors, right? The folks that challenge you. You mentioned a couple of situations, you know, in a pivot scenario almost, where they challenge you on existing go-to-market, different product set, everything else. You know, I think, you know, Rich, you kind of spoke to this maybe on the opposite side of it with the first company. You mentioned, you know, hey, we raised $40 million to sell $40 million worth of stuff and sold for $40 million. Would it have a different investor set or a different set of questions maybe challenged you, changed that business model? Would you have had a different outcome? Would you have had a different approach? Like, what do you think it was kind of a yes answer to the point that you ended up, or you know, anything on that realm in terms of where you ended up selling that company?
You know, I don't think you can count on investors to really understand your business and its source of value. I think that has to come from you and your team. You certainly need to sell that to investors, but you know, we're spending 60 hours a week on this, and we understand it, but they're spending 60 hours every 10 years on this company, and they're not the ones that are going to find this out. And so they have ways that they can be helpful, like changing out a management team when you don't have things figured out, right? But beyond that, I think it really needs to be company-led, CEO-led understanding of the market.
Good investors will insist that that's the case.
Yeah. I would say banks like JP Morgan and others have a ton of information for us to consume to understand our markets and what those sources of value are and that kind of thing too. And some of those are investors as well, so it's not like they can't be helpful, but the real understanding comes from inside.
I appreciate the plug there, for sure. But no, I think, the takeaway is help and information and advice can come from many different corners of the world. Both of you spoke to this within that same parameter. I think Tony, troubles with the management team for POP, or Rich, to your point in terms of changing out somebody on the management team from the investor, or maybe it's happening at the company level. Does that happen naturally over time with growth as well? Do you build management teams for the now and kind of the immediate future? Do you build management teams forever? Hey, I can't hire this CFO now because I'm this size company or I'm too early stage, but when I get to that, I really want that CFO. I mean, how does that process work, and how can a management team help you do what you need to do today and scale to the next step?
So I need bourbon for this answer. This is a hard one.
I only promise this would be mostly people from Northwest.
I can pack some of these bottles.
Yeah, I mean, look, Rich put it in his slide. The obvious statement is that team building is the most important thing that you as an entrepreneur do. This is an area where I've spoken at Duke and State and rounds of applause at how thoughtful I am at strategic management and leadership, and I've screwed it up every time it's on. I talk a good game, but acting on it is really hard. So, especially if you've been at our companies a while, like Rich and I have been, right? So in the beginning, Phononic was material science, right? So it was flat org structure, scientists, engineers, and me, right? And it was like, we're all in this together. Okay. In the spirit of time, the most difficult transition a management team or a team in general goes through, in our experience, the minute you sell something, the entire culture and dynamic of the team changes. The minute you enact commerce, everything is different. You start to bring in different skill set, different experience, product management, sales, and you're often technical engineering teams like, what the hell, Tom? Like, we were the most important people in the company now. Now you're spending all the time with the sales and marketing guys. Tony doesn't come to engineering meetings anymore. So, like, they never wanted me in engineering meetings, but then when I stopped going to them, they gave me crap that I didn't do in engineering meetings. Like, you guys are brutal. But tongue in cheek, if I had to summarize it, that's the hardest thing. We worked so hard on material science and chips, and we developed the ecosystem, and the minute we developed a product to sell was when all of the management issues revealed themselves. Because just the reality is, the skill set and experience that you bring in then is just very different than the skill and the experience of what got you there. And it's culturally brutally hard because you've got people that gave you 80 hours a week, 100 hours a week, lived 4 months in Qingdao, China for you, to get a product launch with a partner, and then they're like, hey man, you're not running engineering anymore. Like, you don't know how to run an engineering budget. And that's a very difficult. So the only thing I can tell you to finish my wallowing is honesty wins the day. Point number one. And Rich mentioned, his management team, 20-25% of the company. If you can articulate that you're changing someone's position status because it's in the best interest of the value of their equity, they won't like it, but they'll understand it.
What's the pressure like from the CEO and the owner leading up to the first sale and afterwards?
It's totally different. Definitely agree with Tony. We at Baebies we have two products. One that we've had in the market since 2017, but that market is a very concentrated market. There are only 35 customers in the U.S. We know them all, they know us. There's one conference per year. We all go to the conference. And so that's been relatively straightforward to sell into. But next up is hospital sales, right? There are 6,000 of those in the U.S. There are 60,000 doctor's offices, you know, and that's where we're going. And so that's a wholly different proposition, and we're not ready for that yet. But we have to wait for FDA, and by the time they're done, we'll be ready. But it won't be the same team.
Yeah. This is where investors matter. Depending on what all of you do in the audience, venture investors, in case of Phononic, we're disruptive, romantic, never been done before. A customer sale to a venture investor, they don't give a crap if it's a good sale or a bad sale. It's somebody bought Phononic's product, which means the technology must work. That ain't the investors I got now. It's why are we in this market? The margins suck. The capital structure doesn't work. Why are we doing this? That's the sort of honesty and punch to the gut I got 18 months ago. Not just from the capital markets, from my own investors, which is, man, like technology's great, the value proposition's amazing, and we ain't getting paid for it. Something's not right. Whereas to the venture guys, they were comfortable because my ability to do that meant that the technology must work. And that ain't enough, right? So that's where that pressure comes in. And that's why I just keep coming back to the lessons I told all of you. Market, product, fit. And then if I had to amend that lesson, market, product, fit with an assessment done by people who know how to do market, product, fit is probably the most important piece to pull that all together.
Are you saying your new investors are private equity? Are they're different than the...
They are different. Who the hell, like people use all different labels anymore now, so it's like, I don't know what it's not early stage venture, right? So it's later stage growth, and depending upon what they need to raise their funds, they call themselves private equity or they call themselves institutional. It doesn't matter. They're just a different stage than where I'm at.
This is a comedy show for Tim over here.
Yeah.
He's funny.
All Tim cares about is that the product work. And, you know, it's just different stage investors value things differently. And then the earlier investors, like Tim, who take all the risk, they very appropriately want to know that whatever Device Solutions does or whatever Rich and I do is working. And then the discipline comes in to make it work financially. And that's a different bias.
And I mean, to a degree, you need that flexibility, right? Because to your point, you're not always going to be talking to the same tier, the same type of investor. When you're early stage, you are talking to the VCs. They do care about different things for different reasons. It doesn't make it bad. It means that you have to have a long-term plan. You got to have, this is what I got to deliver on today to get to the next rung, and at the next rung, I need this. Back to changing teams, changing investors, changing advice. I mean, you know, Rich, to your point, hey, I've got 35 labs, so I know what they want to do. Here's my addressable market today, and that's what gets me in the door and validates my technology.
Yes.
It validates what I have, and I can sell beyond that, right? I mean, what is, you know, not to be a cynical that asks what would you do differently? Well, you know, how'd you start your toe? But there is a natural flow to the business that you're going to have to learn some hard lessons and pivot along the way in order to grow. I mean, is there anything that you would have 100% totally avoided was detrimental to getting you to where you are today? Or was everything a lesson that needed to be learned?
Yeah, I think we, I showed 3 products on that one slide. For the amount of money that we're putting to work, that's probably too many. And I think focus is something we haven't talked too much about, but it runs through, I think, the theme of both of these companies is you only have so much capital, and that capital only gives you so much time. And so you need to be laser focused on what's going to get you to that next big milestone so you can get more money or get sold or whatever it is.
So you went to 3 products when you had more market that was available in the market, but now that the market's changed, you wish you had one of those 3?
Well, the first product, which we've been selling since 2017, that sort of came with the company. We acquired that back from our former acquirer, and so it seemed natural to take that through FDA, and we've shipped 17 million tests. We've saved a lot of lives, and that's terrific what we've done. But if I look back on the capital that I spent on that and the management time that we spent on that, that's not the killer app. This multifunctional platform is the killer app. And so you could call it a distraction. Right now, it's paying for all of my manufacturing overhead, which is good, so that every dollar of contribution margin will drop to the gross margin line, which is awesome. But I'm not sure that's the path I should have taken because it wasn't as focused as it could have been. And I pitched a venture investor really early, and that's what he said. He said, "You're trying to do too many things here."
Yeah.
Wish I had listened to him.
Man, Rich nailed it. If you paid attention to my conversation, I said our product roadmap was driven by pride. The dilemma that Phononic had is the principles of semiconductor cooling are not new. They have been invented for 100 years, but nobody could get them to work in mass markets. So the burden we had is whether it was investors or whether it was, my gosh, I just had a call this morning at 11 o'clock. The company said the same thing. People have heard of semiconductor thermoelectric cooling. And the immediate response is always, "Oh, I thought they didn't work. I thought they were inefficient. I thought they were just a niche market." And they were. They were. So the dilemma that consumed us is, well, we're going to stick it right in their face. Like, we're going to show them that we've perfected both the chip and the ecosystem to levels that people had never done before. And you find yourself chasing corporate America, which is not something you want to do. And so bear with me, it's a great lesson. So we just had this HVAC announcement, license agreement. I just spent a month traveling all over the world. And to avoid making the same mistake twice, I told my team, I need to understand and go to market myself this time. Because HVAC is so massive and so compelling, and there's such a value proposition here, I don't want to screw this up. And in Paris, in the spirit of I'd rather be lucky than good, we had a real estate developer who wanted to develop a first of its kind building. We had an HVAC partner who was willing to try a new technology. We had a general contractor who wanted to build this building to be comfortable and sustainable. And we never went to Carrier, Trane, Johnson Controls. We did it on our own, right? And we're about to introduce the most sustainable, dramatic building ever, right? And this morning, I had a call with one of those names I just mentioned. I almost hung up the phone call. They had every reason not to do it. Well, the DOE has to approve this, and I'm on the call with my guys, like, I had to take my video off because I've now unfortunately done this long enough where F these guys, like, I'm out, like, hey, I'm done, can't do it. And it was awesome, whereas a few years ago, I said, damn it, I'm going to prove to this HVAC manufacturer how wrong they are. No, they can watch the next building be built, and the building after that, and then they can come to me later and pay up for the next license and the next opportunity for the technology. And that's the discipline and the maturity that we have today that I did not have when I started the company.
So give us a percentage on this Paris building. It will use X percent less energy, or it will save.
This is awesome, right? So we just had a complete third party do an independent life cycle analysis. Embedded carbon of ours, so in the building, 8,500 square meters, there are 250 air handling units using our technology. Cumulatively, that's 150 kilowatts of heating and cooling capacity. I get really fired up about this. When solar hit, they stopped talking about the number of panels on a building, and they started talking about gigawatt power contracts. When LEDs hit, they stopped talking about great news, I had 50 light bulbs. No, they talked about kilowatt hours saved per year. Here, I got 150 kilowatts in. We did a full assessment of the building on embedded carbon, which is just a good old-fashioned carbon of the product, 22% less than any legacy incumbent they would put in. Energy savings, turning it on and off, 19% electricity savings. Total cost of ownership, the hardware, the installation, the service, the maintenance, what turning the damn thing on, 22% savings. This is our first generation product. 120 tons of CO2 that won't be emitted over the 20-year life cycle of the building. Now, and I finally got my partner there, we're selling coldness, not hardware. Now you got bankers and private equity who are like, hey, I want to finance this with an energy services company, just like I did solar. And I'm going to screw around talking to Carrier and Train? Right. No freaking way. And that was my summer project.
Okay, guys, who has a question in the audience? Or are you guys all blown away with the education you got here today? Yes, Ethan's blown away.
I'm blown away.
All right. Yes, sir.
So as an investor, you guys have pivoted multiple times. You've been through, maybe we didn't hit our goals, and we need to come and ask for more money. As an investor, from our perspective, every company in the portfolio is asking for more money. Didn't work, here's what we're trying to do. How did you instill confidence in your investors that this was the right time to put more money in, this was the right time to back? Because the hardest thing for us to do is decide on that second check on whether to put it in back.
You've been at this longer than me, but
Well, yeah, you always have the option of finding new investors.
Cut bait.
But yeah, I think a lot of it has to do with communication. We send out a quarterly report that goes to all investors, and we have investor days where they come in to the office, and I think every entrepreneur knows it takes, I don't know what your multiples are in your fund, but it's 4 times as much time and 6 times as much money or something like that as you originally say it's going to, and I'm on my 3rd company, and those are at least the numbers. Fortunately, we get a lot of it non-diluted, which is also helpful, but I think keeping them on your team, having them understand if you have a setback, what's the source of the setback. Tony talked about openness and honesty before. I think that's probably the key.
Okay, questions?
yeah, I'll take that one. It's not, Rich, it's not just communications, it's relentless communications. Like I had one board member joke, he's like, Tony, you're an over-communicator. You're damn right I am. My emails are organized, they're bulleted, they're laid out. And there's a great story here. We have one investor, now we like to have a lot of fun with them. They're sort of like Darth Vader. And in the global data center market right now, data center in telecommunications, there's a massive inventory correction from all the craziness that went on through COVID. We all saw this. And knowing how excited I am about cold chain and licensing, I went to the board earlier this year and confidentially amongst friends, like, I want out. I want out of this business. It's hardware only. I'm done. Dump it. Forget about it. In the spirit of cash preservation. Because I want to be transparent. And this investor was like, chill out. Don't panic. We like this segment. To your point, Rich, it pays for the other crazy stuff that you're doing. You've had 18 straight quarters of growth in this segment. You had 2 bad quarters. Don't panic. And then they went out and hired market research firms to prove me wrong. I was like, okay. And now we're finally seeing a Q4 recovery. And there isn't an I told you so, but it's like, we told you so. So I think to the entrepreneurs, I like to use this expression all the time, whether it's with Tim, if he's on your board or not, make friends before you need them. And anybody who's a potential investor, I treat like a board member. When I run into, whether it's over coffee or whether it's more formal, I have a presentation ready. I have data ready. I walk them through, knowing that Tim's going to have to go into committee, and this is the dark side of venture capital. Tim's going to have to go into committee and compete with the other partners and co-founders and say, hey, I'm going all in on Tony, knowing that his partner's going to say I'm going all in on Rich, and he's got to be armed for that conversation. So be prepared for that.
Okay, any other questions? Or has this been really an education? You guys are, the brain has expanded, and there's not much room for more, but one more question.
Appreciate it. You talked a lot about product fit and product market fit. Are there any kind of standardized skill sets or metrics that you look at when you're diving into that? Skill sets in terms of who you're hiring to do that work, and then metrics in terms of what you're bubbling it up to present it.
Sure. So, I mean, they're 18 months too late, 8 years too late, trying to look at it. 18 months ago, we hired the former product executive for Fitbit at Google as our chief product officer. And Larry came in and is like, you have no processes, you got great market data, you understand where the technology operates, but you can't argue me one way or the other why the hell you're in the markets that you're in. So I guess the short answer is product marketing and product management is a skill set that people have that you can search for. But it's hard for entrepreneurs to bring that in because those people are used to saying no. And we're not, right? Like, hey, Tony, can you do a freezer? Damn right I can. Where a product manager will be like, why are we doing a freezer? Why are we in freaking ice cream? So, yes, there are processes in place where you start with the market that you're in, you look at the product requirement document, the PRD that my guys talk about all the time. Let me give you a great example. Bear with me, Jim. There's a consumer products company that came to us a year ago wanting us to integrate our technology into their cooler that you take to the beach. I did not have a product executive. That consumer company and my engineering team we have an expression for this. They came up with a list of specifications that we now affectionately call the Nobel Prize deck. My engineering team would have to win a Nobel Prize to deliver what those idiots documented. True story. Fast forward to 6 months ago, an experienced product executive came in, and I'm not exaggerating when I say this. They had a spec that said if you went elk hunting in the mountains and killed an elk, you could put the leg in a minus 20 degrees C freezer for 8 days and bring it back to your truck. There's no technology on the planet that can do that. And my head of product management called the FDA and said, what's legally required? Easy, 8 degrees C fresh, maintain 5 days, you're good to go. We can do that right now. So between that consumer company and my engineering team, we came up with a set of product requirements that the market needs and we can do. Wasn't that complicated. I just had to have the right experienced people to do it.
So Richard, I'm going to let you have the last question from me, and I need you to help me do a little sales pitch on the crowd. Can you tell the crowd why they should attend November 17th, the First Flight Venture Lunch, so they can meet the legends of life sciences like Charles Hamner and Art Pappas and people like that? Can you give me a little pitch to convince some of these people that they need to make the same drive you guys made today to go up in reverse, and who they might meet and why it's important?
Yeah, there's a lot going on in life sciences in the Triangle. In that particular event, you'll have the lawyers, the bankers, the entrepreneurs, the entrepreneurial support organizations, the luminaries. They'll all be there, and bring your elevator speech, and you're likely to get some traction there because it's also a pretty friendly crowd as well.
You may meet a board member, you may meet an investor, you may just meet a mentor, you may meet someone who doesn't want their glass of wine and they'll give it to you. So can we give a big round of applause to our guest speakers?